group, so just remember that. Oh, we're going live. Here we go.
We're live. Okay. But Kai Hong is not in yet.
Yeah. Everybody, all right, let's go live.
Oh, Kai Hong, yes. So we are constituted.
Okay, we go live now. All right, thank you.
Yes. Adi, you're in as well.
So, sorry, is it? Yeah, it's live.
Yes. So Kai Hong, you start.
It's yours, Kai Hong.
Hi. Welcome now to this final session of session 7. Let me start by just asking some common questions from members of our audience. Following from the last paper, we noticed that there were some peculiar issues with regards to the regimes here in Central Asia and Kazakhstan. So one question is, despite all these regional peculiarities, what are the evidence-based policies for the geography and for the temperature peculiarity of Central Asia that we have to concern ourselves? Anybody?
I can probably start a little bit, and then maybe others can jump in. But talking about Central Asia, the peculiarities, I mean, it does indicate in the better studies that that temperature makes a small difference. That warmer temperatures are the COVID-19 doesn't spread as easily. However, it's a small impact compared to regulations that have much greater impacts on the social and personal behaviors of people, which have been mentioned by some of my other colleagues. Those really have a huge impact. And when the winter comes, we have we have seasons here. So when we have winter coming in, people are more crushed together in households, and there's greater interactions in that setting instead of being outdoors and going to other places. So there is a difference in behavior, and I think that's the greatest challenge. And that's why I think soft regulation has to also balance against the economic detrimental effects as well as the mental health detrimental effects to somehow find that uneasy kind of place. And I think that's where a lot of the policymakers are trying to find right now.
Right.
Anybody else?
I also was thinking, you see, in Singapore, we find that this MHS, the mask, the hand sanitation, and the safe distancing to be the 3 key secrets, you may say. Whether that idea that health literacy is prevalent in Central Asia.
I think what was pointed out by YY was that once you impose the lockdowns, then of course the statistics will come down. But once you release it and you relax it, then it will come back again. So now countries are experiencing now subsequent waves, second, third, even fourth waves. So how would we be able to sort of avoid some of these issues in Central Asia with the release of the lockdowns?
Maybe we ask why.
Well, I think, in my opinion, a few things will definitely make a big difference. One is how a country treats and manages its infected people, especially when they're asymptomatic and when they're mildly symptomatic. Some of the European countries and North American countries, they actually send them home. And what that means is that someone who's infected will be mingling with their family members. Their family members are allowed to move around in the community, and that's how it spreads in the community. So the ability to actually manage your asymptomatic and your mildly symptomatic cases is just as important as managing those that are symptomatic. So that's the first thing I feel is extremely important. The second is really around what do you do in terms of implications? So in many Asian countries at the moment, not just Singapore, Hong Kong, it's the same, Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, tourism, it's still not allowed. It's still completely shut off. Mass market tourism. There is some degree of green lane business travel, but those are very small amounts of traveling, incoming tourists or incoming travelers. And that's where, if you're able to manage your importation risk, again, you shut off another conduit of increasing community transmission. I don't see that there is anything special that Asian countries are doing that it's very different from European countries. We receive the same kind of advice from WHO. And I think the reality is that why Asian countries are able to manage it better, it comes back down to some of the implementation, the enforcement of the rules that we are able to manage better. So back to you, Carol.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for sharing those evidence-based kind of similarities. But I think in the Central Asian situation, given his peculiar history and the culture, how can you move away from this, in a sense, cultural context into very specific, like how do you change the behaviors? How do you change the behaviors when you have the lockdowns, right? It's not just a lockdown itself, but how do you change the behaviors, not only on the part of the policymakers, but also on the part of the general public, so that you will have some impact on the pandemic. Otherwise, it goes round and around, and so on.
Yeah.
And anybody else?
Yeah, maybe I will start there. That we okay, continue there. My sense is that the acceptance of people is very important. Now in Singapore, we make use of penalties and things, so people are forced to comply. And even then, you see people having a rage. I mean, there was a bus passenger that decided to hammer the captain of the bus, because the bus driver, because he told him to wear a mask. So you can see that human behavior is at the core of things. Whether in Asia people are a bit more compliant, that could be one factor. Certainly in the Western world, they say, look, this is my freedom, this is my right. And as Professor Teo said just now, the fact that people are mildly symptomatic and asymptomatic being let home with an infection is definitely going to be a big source of spread. So not so much as the idea of super spreader, but really is that you need to stop everyone from spreading. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point is that the mask, the hand sanitation, and the safe distancing are three very important ideas, which is very important. I mean, Singapore has proven it. We find that with this combination, we are able to reduce our infection from thousands down to just 3 yesterday. So I think those are things that we need to tell everybody, and hopefully that is taken in a positive light. Because everything stems from behavior. If you don't accept, then you will never follow, and all the evil consequences will follow.
So how would Colin, you address this issue? When you have dealing with human rights and you are dealing with policies that seems to be top down, but it may not be evidence based, right? So how do you get people to be on board the evidence in the first place?
Yeah, I think maybe there's two. It's a very interesting point, Kai Hong. I think there's two issues here. One is trust in government, and the other one is compliance with regulations. And I think in some of the Central Asian countries, whilst there may be lack of trust in governments, there certainly is a culture of compliance. And if there isn't a culture of compliance, then government has tools available to make people more compliant. And maybe, one of the lessons, one of the read across from Central Asia to some other countries is that directive powers are not always a bad thing in a crisis. Even though that may cause some infringement of personal freedoms and so on, for the greater good, having people who are told to do things can ultimately benefit society overall.
Well, it seems to be a trade-off right now between the human rights and freedom argument versus, public health situation right now with dealing with a pandemic where you have to have everybody to come on board. So there will be a trade-off between the two, So some countries and some systems will be able to tackle it much more forcefully than other countries. But it seems to me that in a pandemic of this proportion, the last country, the last person counts, because otherwise they'll come back to reinfect the rest. So I think you're dealing with a big problem on a worldwide scale. So even if you are able to do it, say for one part of the world, if other parts have got differences of opinions, then you're not going to be able to solve this universal problem.
Right. Yes.
Well, time is sort of running, so I only have time for one last question for all panelists. So I can use my prerogative as the moderator to ask this last question to all members, and we'll go in turn. If we were to advise the governments of Central Asia, what would be your key takeaway from your presentations in about 1 minute each? All right, so over to you, Professor Teo, please.
Thanks, Kai Hong. So I would only round up by saying two things. The first advice is really clear, transparent communications such that the public knows exactly what is the current local situation and what do they need to do in the community to protect themselves and to protect others. So clear communications. The second is that as the government, once you put in place certain rules and regulations, you cannot take it for chance that the people will keep to the rules. You must have a way to monitor: are your businesses following the rules? Are your citizens following the rules? And if they are not following the rules, how do you enforce the rules and how do you punish people who will, well, perhaps you won't punish immediately. You may want to warn, you may want to advise, educate, but at the end of it, you must have a way to punish people who simply refuse to follow the rules. So 1 minute, up, over back to you, Kai Hong.
Thank you, YY. What about you, Professor?
I jump in next. Okay, so what is important is the idea of MHS, the mask, the hand sanitation, as well as the safe distancing. I think these three important things has got to be fundamental in each of us. That's point number one. Point number two is also important to tell people the mask not only save others but save yourself too, right? Because what goes around comes around. If the people around you is saved by your mask, then they in turn are going to save you. And so that may be something that will begin to change people's perception that it is not doing for others, it's doing for yourself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Goh. Byron, you have something different to offer?
Yes, just very quickly. It takes a village to change the situation, to more effectively change personal and social behaviors, and that should include the government, religious institutions, United Nations, non-government organizations, and many other people. So, and the whole community. That's all I want to say.
And then good governance from the last speaker.
So aside from the recommendations that our colleagues have given, I think one of the particular issues in Central Asia is data reliability. So, I mean, it's just inconceivable that Turkmenistan can claim there's no C-19 cases. So I don't think that, does the region any good, does a great disservice to other countries trying to tackle it. And, our data shows that Central Asia, post-Soviet countries have not been very good at public information campaigns. So I think those two issues would be my suggestions.
Okay. Thank you. So with that final note from our GSPP professor, I would like to thank our sponsors, the GSPP and the Nazwa University. We have taken this evidence-based approach through answering the question of how do you bring about good governance in tackling the COVID-19 pandemic that's ravaging us right now. So I hope we will take this on. This is just the beginning as we discuss all this. And so concluding this session, I wish to thank all the speakers for your very able participation, the organizers for supporting us, and members of the audience who have actively participated in listening to us. So we have taken into consideration of the questions. So we hope that we will carry on this dialogue because the pandemic is still with us. We hope to follow up with further work among ourselves to tackle the challenges and to improve the current situation here in Kazakhstan. So thank you very much for participating in this. I hope to see you again. Right. Thank you very much.
Right.
Bye.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you, Kai Hong.
Yes. Okay.